Mr. Chair, we are live.
Thank you. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference. And town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties. Good afternoon, everyone. I am now calling this meeting to order. First, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There are no disclosures. We are now moving on to the adoption of minutes. We have the minutes of the regular meeting of September 13th, 2021. Are there any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, can I get a mover to approve these minutes? Moved by Regional Councillor Sterling Lee. All those in favor? All in favor, this motion carries. Next, we have the minutes of the closed session of September 13th, 2021. Are there any questions on the closed minutes? I see none. Can I get a mover to approve these minutes? Moved by Councillor Lisa Bauer. All those in favor? None opposed. This motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda. I will list what's being pulled and by whom numerically. 4.1 by Regional Councillor Crawford, 4.2 by Deputy Mayor Lee, 4.5, 6, and 7 by Mayor Collier. Are there any other items that members wish to pull? I see none. Now, can I get a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda? Mayor Collier, all those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. This motion carries. We are now moving on to 4.1 of the consent agenda by Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford. Regional Councillor Crawford, you have the floor. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I can't believe the overwhelming response, positive response we received from our newsletter this time. Thank you so much. It seemed to have gotten to most of Ward 1, which was awesome. We had a huge response from our seniors saying that they were so thankful to have a piece of paper in hand to be able to read about items. And actually the recycling lids, I think I've delivered to over 100 people some lids because of that newsletter. And so apparently there were a few people in Ajax that were very, very happy to receive these lids. And so I just wanted to thank everybody that was involved in the creation of the letter or the newsletter, to Devin and to all. I think I'm going to forget people, but I think that Marie Wiggers had quite a big part in this with trying to keep the deliveries on schedule and fixing things that didn't work. And I really wanted to thank you. I know I wasn't maybe as in favor as everybody else was at the beginning, but after hearing the response from our residents, I really feel like this is something that a certain group of our residents really, really appreciated. Those that are not on social media, those that just want to be informed desperately, but are kind of lost in how to do it because we've gone so media based. So really, I just wanted to thank everyone for all the effort put into this and for the success of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You are very welcome. I think that goes for most of us, if not all of us. Question by Councillor Rob Tyler Moore. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Quick comment. I just wanted to say thank you to staff as well. And I too really was overwhelmed at the response. And it got the conversation going across the town, actually, in all the wards 2 and 3. We got questions about things that were mentioned in those newsletters. So another reminder that social media, which I'm a huge proponent of, our I think it's about 15,000, maybe, I'm just paraphrasing. The amount of people that are on our Twitter is 130,000 in the town. So it's a nice way to reach. And I thought it was very effective. Great job on staff. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Councillor Bauer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I echo my colleagues. It was a fantastic idea and it went very well. Lots of positive reviews. Maybe I'll ask, I'm not sure if I should ask Devin or Rachel. Is there any feedback you can provide? How was it with the delivery process, with getting it all together, the coordination, etc.?
Through the chair, to answer Councillor Bauer's question there, we had a great experience with this particular delivery company. We were in touch through Zoom, through phone calls, through email, and each time we had contacted the company, we received responses quickly, efficiently, and they were able to walk us through the entire process from beginning to finish.
Great. And I know that I had some residents in Ward 3 in our ward, Joanne and I, that didn't receive it. And I know we reported them to your department. Was there any follow-up or response from the company as to what happened? And I'm sorry to bring a negative spin. I do not mean that. I think it was a great experience.
Through the chair. So those particular ones, we are still just following up in the inquiry process here, and we will be back in touch with council regarding that. However, there is, as noted in the report, 10% industry standard for maybe a missed delivery, a street missed, and that is an industry standard. However, each time that we have brought anything to this particular company's attention, they have redelivered, and we'll be back in touch with your specific streets as well.
That's wonderful. Thanks very much for that. That's it for me, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. Regional Councillor Dies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to you, Ms. Jarvis. I just had a question about, we spoke of this previously, and it was about apartment buildings for seniors. There's 3 of them in Ward 3. And believe it or not, they don't even get the newspaper since COVID, which is their only form of news. So were we able to drop some of these newsletters in the apartment buildings?
So through the chair, Regional Councillor Dies, the senior center and apartment buildings were a little bit more of a concern with the Metro land option. So with the Canada Post option, all households were directly delivered to through their super mailboxes. So the way they would regularly receive their mail, they would have received this newsletter as well.
So is there something we can do to address that if we do another drop in newsletters, perhaps, as the counselors in the ward, we can drop them at those facilities?
Absolutely. We did have additional copies printed as well, and those are readily available. And if there are any further printing that needs to be completed, we can also do that by request as well.
Okay, I appreciate it. And thank you for all your hard work on this. I know that our residents quite enjoyed getting something that they could read locally. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions from members of council? No, I just have one. Ms. Jarvis, the little hiccup that we were talking about with the Ward 1 newsletters being delivered to Ward 2, was that rectified?
Through the chair, Councillor Khan, we did receive confirmation that the area that was originally misdelivered to in Ward 2 did receive a follow-up delivery the week of September 27th, and we have received the Canada Post stamp receipts for those.
Wonderful. It was very well done, and we did get to engage our community as we always set out to do. So thank you very much. That was very well done. Thank you. All right. Regional Councillor Crawford, since you pulled this, would you like to move this report?
Yes, you chair. Yes, Chair, I would.
Okay, Regional Councillor Crawford has moved this report. All those in favor? I see all hands. None opposed. This carries. Thank you very much. We will now move on to Deputy Mayor Lee with 4.2. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, staff looked into this. It doesn't look like something based on the powers provided through the various provincial acts that it's something that AJAS can do. So the only thing I wanted to do in this case was, and I believe the clerk has it, I want to just put an amendment into the report, I guess, just asking that the Staff be directed to prepare and send a letter to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing advocating for Ontario municipalities to be given the authority to implement a land banking levy. I don't believe I need a seconder in GDC. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak on it just very quickly.
Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. A good idea is a good idea. At the end of the day, I think Mayor Collier, it's a very forward-thinking proposal. I don't think it does the municipality any good or its residents any good to just have developers sit on land as it increases in value, because it doesn't allow the municipality to progress at all. And so I just want to make sure that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing understands that, I think we understand the severe, what we're asking, which is for more responsibilities, but I think it's also a fair ask. I think municipalities should be able to make their own decisions as to how we can manage land that we deal with on a daily basis. In fact, I think we should be broadening a lot of the municipalities' responsibilities, because at the end of the day, a lot of the costs are downloaded to municipalities through the provincial government. So this is just one example where I think that it's a win-win. It takes it off the provincial side and allows the municipality to kind of dictate their own future. So I'd appreciate support from council on this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. We will have everyone speak on this, and then we will go to the moving or voting. Regional Councillor Crawford, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I will support this. I guess my only frustration with sending something else to the MPP for the Municipal Affairs and Housing is that I don't think he's actually answered anything that we've sent him over this past year. And that is extremely frustrating. I mean, at least say no. If it's no, it's no, but at least acknowledge the fact that you've received information and a motion or a letter or something. I mean, I was just saying to Christy, have we ever sent a letter to an MPP to say, hello, we're still waiting for a response on this, and this. I just, I'll support this because it's a good amendment, but I'm extremely frustrated by the lack of response for things that we have sent in and asked for. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Mayor Collier first, then Regional Councillor Dice.
I'll try and address a couple of those comments that Councillor Crawford made. First, I'll support the amendment. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask. We did get one letter back, Marilyn, and that was turning down our delegation request for AMO. So we did get told no once, but the other 5 letters went unanswered. So that does not mean I won't keep trying, and I will write this letter and get this out, assuming that this passes. And it doesn't hurt to ask, and this is another thing that we can also bring to Ontario big city mayors at some point, since it is a common issue that I think many other municipalities will probably want to weigh in on as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. However, the legal opinion here was that we really don't have the authority to tell somebody when it's time to develop their property. I mean, and I guess my question, to the mover is, are we talking about a large developer? Because there are people who do buy a piece of land with the intention to build a new home or whatever, and just don't have the means to do that right away. So, again, we don't really have that legal authority to say, okay, you're the landowner, you have to do it now on our time frame. So I don't see how that's going to work. But yes, to you, Councillor Lee, Regional Councillor Lee, what are you envisioning here? More large properties that are up for development?
I think, Chair, if I may, I think the intent is to just allow a framework with which the municipality can set some rules and guidelines for developing land. So the province could very well decide that, yes, this wouldn't apply to small parcels and only for large developers, which I'd be okay with. The intent is mainly for larger developers, to your point, but I also think that a resident should be able to sit on land for 100 years and not do anything with it to the detriment of the municipality. So again, I don't know the nuances behind it. I think the initial motion, the initial ask to staff was for larger parcels, but ultimately this amendment simply asks for some sort of framework that the municipality can work within to kind of set our own rules in our municipality.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other? Yes, Councillor Tyler Moore. I'm sorry about that, sir.
As I always say, I'll be extremely quick. There's 445 municipalities in Ontario. I think it's extremely important that, you know, we nudge the province because they have a lot of autonomy over us. It's just the way the system is. So I think anytime that we can get together and say, this is our position, this is our position, because maybe one municipality sounds small, but when Mayor Collier goes to the big city mayors conference and he has like-minded councils, it's a good thing. So I'm going to support this motion. And I think we need to do that, even if it's a little bit outside of our realm. But it's a good motion. I'll support it. Thank you.
Any other questions on this for the amendment from Regional Councillor Lee? Okay, I guess a clerk direction. Do we need to vote on this right now?
Mr. Chair, yes, you can proceed with the vote on the amendment.
Wonderful, thank you. So all those in favor of Councillor Lee's amendment, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This motion carries. I guess I have one opposed, so motion passes. Thank you. So do I just move on to the next one then, clerk?
Mr. Chair, you should now request a mover and have a vote on the motion as amended.
I'll
Okay,
move the motion as amended.
okay, wonderful. Those in favor? Okay, all in favor and moved by Mayor Collier. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Mayor Collier, I think the rest of the floor is yours. We will now move on to 4.5. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to our operations staff. I'm just noticing under financial implications, this might be to finance. We've got contract admin, which we see sometimes, but only I'm used to seeing it on bigger projects. I wonder why we have almost $57,000 in contract admin on this project for street lighting. Seems like a lot for oversight.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, it's Director Meredith calling. I do have Rick Chalmers on the call as well. Typically for projects such as this, contract admin as a whole has been awarded by the region of Durham to the lead consultant on this project. So they would typically deal with the design and the contract admin, of which streetlights are a component of that. So it'd be based on the tender documents and the overall award for the Wesley Road project as a whole, and would be subsequently broken down on that basis. So we would have the opportunity to review the documentation, verify its costs, and it's reflected within the contract award value.
So I'm wondering, like, what are we? This project is $151,000 over budget, and that $151,000 over budget is made up from the contingency and the contract admin. And I want to know, what are we going to get from this contract admin? To me, I'm not an engineer or a streetlight installer, but I don't think it's that difficult. We do street lighting all the time. Why do we need to spend $150,000 in admin and in contingency? We know what they cost. We're replacing existing. We're just widening them out because it's our responsibility. It seems to me these are add-ons that are unnecessary in this case.
Just in response, this street lighting award is just a small component of the overall scope of work that the region is undertaking as it relates to the widening of Wesley Road between Roslyn and Taunton. The street lights are just, as referenced here, just one component of that capital project. So the street lights are embedded as part of that multi-million-dollar project. It's just broken out because the local tier or lower tier sort of municipalities are responsible for street lighting. So those prices are itemized separately in the tendering process. But contract admin as a whole for the entire project, which is I don't know the total construction value, but as you're aware, it's multi-million sub dollars, and the contracted min is part of that and then gets broken out. The contingency is completely different, and it's a standalone based on a percentage of the construction award value. So yeah, those are based on, as I say, certain percentage splits and how the contract is broken down based on the way that it was tendered, and it was tendered by the region through a competitive process. The town has the opportunity to review that competitive process from a procurement standpoint. And as I mentioned, the streetlights are just one component of that entire project.
Well, and this is why, Mr. Mayor, that I have an issue. This is a regional project. I mean, if the streetlights are just a small component of it, why are we paying this contracted min for a regional project?
We're paying a contracted min fee for the whole project, and then it gets broken out by subsection. So there would be a contracted min fee that would be applied to the Westney Road widening project as an entire project, and this then gets split out. We would review it based on that overall contract award value and how it's been awarded.
I'm still not understanding. It's a regional project.
Yes.
Does the region require us to pay this contracted min? I mean, the region should be paying their own contracted min. I get that. I don't understand why we're paying $60,000 almost in contracted min, $57,000 in contracted min to install some streetlights, which is a very small part of a large regional project. It's the piece we're responsible as a town, correct? But we're not responsible for all the rest outside the sidewalks.
So this contracted min is not the total construction or the contracted min value of the project. That value of that project may be $600,000 or $700,000, right? Of which there's then a percentage split based on the work that's to be done. So this is not the complete contracted min value. It's much larger than that gets applied to the entire project as a whole. This is based on unit prices that were awarded during the contract award, what the proportionate share is of contracted min for the street lighting component. And it does work in reverse as well. There are roads that we've constructed, local roads, that the region pays their construction admin to the town for their proportionate work that's being completed as well. So it works both ways depending on who the municipal lead is that's working on the project.
Are you saying it's our standard our standard process to have contracted min on local road projects?
On some, so for example, when Westney Road is being widened between Church and Westney Road, yes, there'll be a contracted min component to it. The lead designer, the lead consultant, the engineer that's retained to do the design is typically on site and is awarded the contract to do the contract admin work, fulfilling the obligations of the contract based on the design and the specifications that they develop. So it is very standard for the lead consultants to be awarded contract admin in addition to the detailed design. It's pretty standard practice.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to pay closer attention because I've been doing this a while and I don't recall seeing us paying contract admin on a regional project, but I'll keep that in mind. Moving on to the capital budget sheet, I want to reiterate my comments I've made in the last few capital budgets, and that is, and this is to finance, it makes it very difficult for me to track. If you open this sheet, it says, for one, start year 2020. Okay, fine. So I guess that's the year it entered. But I would like to see two things. One, the year the project is supposed to start. So the year it hits the books, the year it's supposed to start. So say this said 2016 and was supposed to start in 2020, and now we're in 2021, but it's going to start in 2022. I would like to know that information. I would ask that that be added. But second, this is down as project number 1012911. And when I look back on the capital budget, it doesn't have 1012911. In the capital budget, it's listed as ENG 025. So unless I do a search for Westney and I spend a bunch of time trying to cross-reference this and find it, it's almost impossible. And I have asked a few times that surely somewhere in the text portion where it says, for instance, reference 2018 BC background study, which is new, we could put in there that cross-reference ENG 025 or something. So when we do look back to see where this is, it makes it easier. I guess, Chair, through you to Ms. Valentin, where are we on that? Because I brought this up at least the last two budgets.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So with regards to the numbering of the projects, and this one in particular, when we are bringing forward our budget, we don't have assigned accounting numbers to them. That's why they come forward with the alphanumeric. Once it gets approved by council, it has to go into our accounting system, which then requires a 6-digit number. So that's where the change occurs. So this you wouldn't, we can in future put it in the report so that council is aware of what the budget number was versus the accounting number. We can do that. As far as the budget coming forward, we are making modifications to the capital budget this year that I will reach out to each of council prior to it being publicized. We had to go to a 10-year budget versus a 5-year capital budget. And that is going to change the way things look moving forward.
Okay, and that's all I'm asking for is when this gets approved and the change is made, take that ENG 025 and put it in the comment section so we can cross-reference it. It would make it so much easier
on the
to save
report.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions here. I'm happy to move this at the appropriate time.
No problem, Mr. Mayor, but first, Regional Councilor Crawford has some questions.
I just have a question through you, thank you, Mr. Chair, to Director Meredith around the admin. Would they also be looking after the sidewalks on Westney Road, the design of that, or how does, because that's a municipal responsibility, correct?
So there's a couple of things sort of within, I guess, a regional project. Typically the lower tier municipalities are responsible to budget for street lighting and multi-use trails. So, and in this case, sidewalks are also recommended and proposed. So there's generally a split cost in terms of the responsibilities of the lower versus the upper tier. So to answer your question about contracted min, because it's all captured as part of one project, the contracted min would be supported by the region of Durham, as they're the one that has the executed contract with the general contractor.
Okay, maybe I'm overthinking this. So I know that this report is around street lighting, but it's basically the entire project. So is it the same person doing the rest of it, or do we have to hire another admin for the sidewalking?
No,
am I overthinking this, Dave? I'm sorry if I am.
So it would have been awarded by the region as one contract, and there would be one contract admin associated with this project. So the contract admin, whoever the consulting engineer is, would be responsible for all of the roadworks, signals, multi-use trails, street lighting. All aspects of the project would fall under one centralized contract admin group, unless they've subcontracted it, but it is all the responsibility of one consultant.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions on 4.5? Seeing that there's none, the mayor moved this. All those in favor? I see all hands. This was not opposed. The motion carries. We will now move on to 4.6 of the consent agenda, pulled by Mayor Collier. Mayor Collier, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Mr. Meredith. Does the, which one was it? The security cameras at Ajax Community Center South include the turf fields?
Yes, it does.
Okay. find my other questions here. I think that was my only question. What's the time frame going forward, Mr. Meredith? This has to now, if approved today, go through. I mean, okay, sorry. How many cameras are you going to do in the south parking area?
Actually, I have Mr. Ford on the call, who was involved in doing some of the original design and layouts to support the costing. Ray, if you're there, can you answer that, please?
Yes, through the chair, we're looking at approximately 6 cameras to cover the south parking lot, and then cameras looking towards the turf fields.
Okay. I'm just wondering why we need so many cameras to cover a parking lot. I'm just looking at the price. It's considerably higher, more than double the Upper Hermitage Park, where I assume we might need 1 or 2. I thought actually we already had some there in Hermitage Park, but
yes, through the chair, there is existing at Hermitage Park. The system is very outdated and going to be replaced with network cameras up there. And also we're looking to connect it to the town's network. So there's a network component at Hermitage that's added for cost up there. That's a very small system of 4 cameras looking at the parking lot. At ACC, when the parking lots were done, there was new pole lighting installed, and they ran conduits from ACC building out to those pole cameras in the parking lot. So we have to do some long distance wiring back to the building so that we can connect it to our network. So there's some added costs that is driving that one up a little higher.
well, that leads to my next question. I'm wondering why we're not using wireless. I mean, that's the whole thing that I've been talking about is with LED and solar now, I didn't think it was necessary to run the underground infrastructure, and we'd be able to do more projects with less money rather than having to run a lot of cabling to these. With wireless technology, that would get rid of that extra expense.
We have previously installed in the past wireless technology, and we still, in consultation with our security report, there's still not a perfect system out there that uses the cellular data to download the video and transfer it over wireless. Data for video is huge, takes up huge amounts of bandwidth. There is ability to maybe get a still picture and stuff like that, but the ability to download is really difficult, and it's not to the level that we need it right now.
Well, I wouldn't expect that we need to keep this data long term. Work over itself on the DVR, and if there's an incident, we can go back.
Mayor Collier, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Connection. You're breaking up.
Okay. I'm in that spot where I generally lose, so I'll be back in 5 minutes. That's the end of my questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We have questions. Deputy Mayor Lee, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know was there really a need for security cameras and lighting? I get, but the Westney Road leash-free area, was there a particular reason we chose that for security cameras?
I can actually speak to that. It's Director Meredith again. Just with respect to the Westney Road leash-free area, it's been an area from a couple of perspectives that we had identified through the security assessment to introduce cameras. One, as you may be aware, that area is quite isolated. The parking lot is quite far removed from Westney Road. It is depressed. There is not a lot of sightlines or visibility. And from a general security standpoint, we've had that feedback over the years, and it's been identified as an area of concern or risk. The second component was that is probably a primary area that we have in town for illegal dumping. So, and we're not talking illegal dumping in terms of, some, minor residential waste. People will use that facility to, if they're doing a kitchen reno project, you'll find a whole kitchen in that parking lot. So it's been a constant area, and we've dealt with it a couple of times this year where there's been large volumes of material, again, because it is so secluded and it is, something that is not visible from the street. So we feel that, and it was identified through our security assessment as an area to consider sort of the introduction of cameras. So for those two reasons, we've identified, and we feel with this funding opportunity that it makes sense.
That literally answers my question perfectly. My last one is, will there be an opportunity to add security cameras and lighting over the years without necessarily doing a full security overview with a consultant?
Absolutely, and I think that's something that the security assessment has identified is within the park system. There are other locations. We do look at prioritizing locations in consultation with DRPS. So we've done that in years past, where, if we are going to make that investment, we do identify and sort of work cooperatively with DRPS as well. So by all means, we will look to add and enhance security cameras within the park system as we move forward as well.
Perfect. Thank you for your answers, and thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Councillor Lisa Bauer, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, and I get some of my questions have been answered, but so I'm gonna ask, so is this sort of the top 4 of a long list of results from a security assessment? And this is what, with your interviews with bylaw and DRPS and town staff, that these are sort of the top 4 priorities, and there are other projects that will, I guess, stay on that list until there's additional funding.
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Bauer, that's correct. There are other, and we started to implement security cameras in the park system probably 9 or 10 years ago. So we did start to introduce them in and around some of our satellite facilities, such as Crothers Marsh Pavilion, Rotary Park, the Doric Masonic Lodge, sort of that, where they're in proximity to the parks and open space system, that we can use the buildings to provide that security and surveillance. There still are areas we've identified, like Greenwood is an area that is somewhat remote that we've identified as a future location for security cameras as well. And there are other locations within the park system that we'll identify and look to budget over the years to introduce further security cameras.
Okay, thank you. And I know the funding is coming from the OCLIF, Ontario Cannabis Legalization Fund. Are we, is there any projection of additional funding coming in that way?
I am not 100% certain of additional funding. I'm not sure if there is someone on the call, whether it would be Cass or Christy or someone from finance that might be able to add to sort of the future funding piece.
Thank you so much.
Through the chair, it's Cass here. I believe it is not, this is the full amount that we will receive. So there was a first payment, a second, third, and final payment, I believe, that'll be issued. So I think what we have in the account is what we're going to get, unless finance has additional information. Thank you.
Thanks, Cass.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any additional funds that we should be receiving. The province has left that open. I haven't received any communication from them indicating that we would receive anything else.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions, Chair.
Okay. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. Thank you, your chair. Here, sorry. Just a question, if we were to add any more cameras to different areas, is there a grant program that we could access through this? I know a few years, maybe a year ago, there was a grant that was offered for, I'm going to get this wrong, I don't know if this is what we're using, CCE cameras. I'm not sure if that's the right acronym or not, but I know that there was grants that were offered for that. I think it was a year ago. Anyway, is there an opportunity that we could access grants to get any more cameras, since this, I mean, our funding will likely get used up on the cannabis thing. Just curious about that.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Crawford. There are some programs that have come available through Public Safety Canada, primarily the federal government, for crime prevention funding. We, as a municipality, are often not eligible, and that's been the challenge in the past, that these funds are normally targeted more towards places of worship, private educational institution, and private community centers. But that is something that we are aware of and will continue to monitor if there are any funds that come available where municipalities are eligible.
Okay, I'm sure you're on it. I just wanted to ask the question. And so when we put these cameras up, I'm assuming there's signage up saying that there are security cameras. I'm sure it's on Hermitage Park. I've just never really noticed it or even looked for it. And so anybody entering the premises would know that they have a potential of being, they're being watched. Is that correct, Director Meredith?
Yes, we would typically provide signage associated with the use of surveillance cameras.
And the police have access to anything that they would require, correct?
DRPS actually on a fairly frequent basis contacts Mr. Ford, who produces video evidence, and it has proved successful in many situations in terms of the footage that we provide. So it is very valuable. And just getting back to Mr. Ford's comment about the importance of data storage, because it has helped going back in time period as it relates to that information.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Regent Councillor Crawford. In case I missed anyone, I'd like to give the mayor an opportunity, because Mr. Mayor, we missed your last part of your comments and questions. If you would like to bring that back, the opportunity is yours. Sean, Mr. Mayor, did he freeze? There he is. I still think you're in a bad spot, Mr. Mayor.
You're on mute, Sean.
I think, oh, there he is.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We see
Can you hear
your
me now?
We can hear you, yes.
It's better when I'm unmuted. Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in.
You're still choppy. You see I'm being gentle?
Perhaps if he calls in, that might be helpful.
Good suggestion.
I'm how about now?
That came through, but nothing else. Would you like to call us in with video? Yeah, that was okay. But you're frozen, right?
I'm actually on the phone right now. It is called in.
Okay. You're frozen.
Better?
A little bit better, but you're still choppy.
Okay, I literally need like 30 seconds to get out of this zone.
Okay, we'll wait for you.
My understanding is that once the province achieves, I think it's $100 million marijuana sales, there will be a percentage over that goes to municipalities. To Ms. Valentin.
Ms. Valentin? Ms. Valentin, I don't know if the mayor froze or he's asking you to speak to the 100 million.
No, I did.
Okay.
Sorry, did you hear that question, Chair?
Yeah, no, I heard the part about, I heard Ms. Valentin's name being called to address maybe the 100 million.
So further to Councillor Bauer's question, my understanding was once the province receives 100 million in sales, then over and above that, municipalities will be receiving more funding.
Okay. Okay, we heard that loud and clear.
Through the chair, if staff can take some time to look into that, that might be helpful. I think what I can see here is that the language in the latest communications from the minister indicates a final payment. However, there is also mention of a surplus above exceeding $100 million. The province will provide 50% of the surplus to the municipalities. That being said, from the language is a bit confusing. So if it's agreeable, staff can look into that and share that information once we've confirmed.
Okay, yeah, please get back with that. The reason why I bring that up is I'm hoping that this will be an ongoing type thing we can do, that as more funding comes available, hopefully we'll be able to augment our security in the town and hopefully cut down on graffiti, illegal dumping, that type of thing. Mr. Meredith, is that the intent, is to have this be an ongoing type thing, like a report we see annually on suggestions for supplement the system?
Mr. Meredith?
Okay, I think I got it.
Give it a shot.
I would say what we would be doing on an annual basis is identifying through the capital budget process opportunities for security cameras, and we will look at those in terms of priorities with other capital projects. But yes, it is something that will be reviewed annually. There's a number of recommendations that are being made, not only within the park system, but the security system within our facilities as well. That's been identified as an area for future investment as well.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions on 4.6, members of council? So none. So this is going to be moved by Councillor Bauer. All those in favor of this report? I see all hands. This motion carries. Thank you. So 4.6. That's it for the mayor. 4.6. Oh wow. So we're all done here. I thought I had more for Sean, but okay. All right. Wonderful.
Chair,
yes, sir.
I believe 4.7 was also pulled.
Was it really? Let me see. Yes, there's 4.7. So I want to make sure the mayor is, that's true. Make sure he's in the clear grounds to speak. Give me a test, Mr. Mayor, on 4.7. See how you sound. Or we're going to bring you back to the meeting. You have
How is that?
That sounds
I don't have any questions on this one. I think when I originally looked at it, I just wanted to touch base with the residents and make sure that they were good with it and everybody's good. So I'm happy to move it.
Okay, so that was moved by Mayor Collier, and all those in favor? On 4.7, I see all hands, and that's none opposed. That motion carries.
And my apologies, everybody, for the audio. Hopefully that's that.
It's a bit better now. So as you get closer, it will be better. Thank you. So now we will move on to discussions. Discussions on the Durham Regional Cycling Master Plan 2021 by Director Romanowski and Armida Francia, our Active Transportation Coordinator. Would you like the floor, Director and Army?
Thank you, Chair. Nope, it's up for discussion. So any questions that council has for us, either myself, John, or Army, if she's on the line, can definitely help you answer them. Just to familiarize council, Durham Region did do a presentation to Ajax Council on this, I believe, at our last council meeting. So it pretty much covers off everything that was in there, in addition to kind of just a little bit of the Ajax stuff that's going on with regards to the Durham Cycling Master Plan.
So I do have questions for you, sir, by Regional Councillor Crawford. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So in the recommendation, you're asking that the town of Ajax recommends that Durham Region move forward immediately with hiring a regional active transportation coordinator. Why do we need to do that? Won't Durham Region just do that anyway?
Why do we need to do that? I think
I can.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, John.
I can
Feel
answer
free to
that.
jump in there.
So, through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, it's more so we want to encourage them to do it quickly. In the language of the cycling plan, it speaks of hiring someone, but it doesn't give a time frame. In our opinion, in reading what the plan recommends, we think this regional staff person should be in as quickly as possible, because they talk about that staffer helping move forward with policies, move forward with projects. And so we want to make sure the region has that person online as quick as possible.
So it's actually the as soon as possible in the part of our motion, as opposed to the person who is there hiring. That's important there.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Gotcha. There's mention too of Wayfair signage. Is that, I know.
Wayfinding signage?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's it. Wayfinding signs. And I know we have like a ton of those on the lakefront. But is there anything that's going to be happening along Taunton Road as far as Wayfair? Is this an appropriate question to be asking John or Jeff, or should I wait for another time? I realize that they're our responsibility and they're not part of the Durham Region Cycling Master Plan, although it is mentioned in there.
I believe I know your question, Regional Councillor Crawford. So through the chair to you. So the regional cycling plan notes or proposes the development of a regional wayfinding strategy. And as you all know, the town of Ajax, we have our own. So that is part of the clarification that we seek in recommendation 2A, is how does a regional initiative like regional wayfinding, how is it integrated, or how does it collaborate with a local initiative like ours?
Yes.
We may, in our opinion, we're a municipality that takes active transportation quite seriously, and in some cases have policies and initiatives that are well thought out and have been in use or in force for many years. So that's where we feel this proposed regional plan is a great step forward for the region. We just want to know and have better clarity is how does everything coordinate with each other? How, we want to make sure we're part of the final preparation of these policies or the wording of these policies, so that we can ensure they jive with what we may already be doing.
I agree with that 100%. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow up to what Regional Councillor Crawford was talking about, my question is about signage. And on page 82, that first point about develop region-wide signage design guidelines. So I'm guessing that means that each municipality may currently have its own unique style of signage. And is this a plan to sort of replace that with everybody has the same type of signage? Not necessarily the wayfinding, but just the directional signage.
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, I think the intent would be there would be a regional level sign, but agreed. I think further clarification needs to be made exactly, what is a regional level sign and what does it look like versus what is a local sign, especially in the terms of wayfinding. There may be regional destinations that make sense, but at the town, we have local destinations that we want to point out and highlight. So again, I think that's comes back to the staff wanting some more clarity, because we think it could work, but given especially all the work we've put into our wayfinding, we want to make sure it doesn't clash or be in conflict with what we may be doing.
But on another point, Councillor Bauer, if I may, maybe the region looks at our wayfinding signage as maybe the standard, and they can build off of that too, right? So I
That'd be
think there'll
great.
have to be a definite collaboration between the lower tier municipalities in the region to kind of figure out what that signage is, similar to what John says, regional destinations versus local destinations, and what that signage program looks like. You know, we wouldn't be looking to get rid of our signage or have it replaced, because that would seem that wouldn't make sense given how far along we've brought forward our initiative. So
Correct.
definitely working with the region to find something that fills that void, but also going forward, what does that program look like?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Director. Thank you so much, Mr. Grieve. That was my questions, Chair.
Okay, Mayor Collier, you first, then Regional Councillor Crawford after. Did I miss anyone in the?
And I did ask some of these questions at the region. This is a regional cycling plan, and I have absolutely no interest in changing any of our signage, nor should we. In my opinion, we are already head and shoulders above any other municipality, and no disrespect intended. It's just, you know, we are far, far ahead, and they can catch up to us and take on ours if they like. But any regional program to try and tell municipalities how to change is not something that I'm really interested in entertaining. But also, the region has very few regional roads in Ajax. So there's any things that they bring forward. I mean, for instance, what's Taunton Road? We've already paid for and installed the multi-use path along the majority of Taunton Road. So now they want to come and fill in a segment, but it's a very small dollar item because we have already done it all and paid for it all. So what I brought forward to the region was, you know, hey, how about you reimburse Ajax for a lot of the costs we've already paid if you're going to be upfronting costs to other municipalities. So just so council knows, it's not a question there, but just so you guys know, that's sort of the approach that I'm trying to take at the region is we've already paid this. We shouldn't be paying again. If anything, we should be reimbursed if you're going to be paying for others. And I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mayor. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me jump in one more time. Sorry, I just wondered, this regional position, will we have to pay a percentage of their salary like we had to with a street lighting person? Just curious.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, no, or staff's assumption is no. It does not state that in their plan. It just simply states the region recommends the hiring of this staff to support, the proposed programs and policies within this updated plan. So it reads as a Durham Region employee or staffer, as their requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, Regional Councillor Dice, just in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the whole objective of signage is to make it very easy for people who are visiting our municipalities and don't necessarily know them. And sometimes we don't put that hat on. Sometimes they don't really, I guess if you're a visitor, you don't really care if it's a regional road or a municipal road, as long as there's signage that tells me how to get north, south, east, west, and where to eat and where there's a toilet. I mean, those are the really important things. And I know that our signage is very important. And I think for every municipality, they can keep that. Like I say, as long as on a map, you've got all roads that are marked. And obviously the regional ones are links because they're major roads. The other thing too, and I stress this a lot, is there was some mention in the report about maintenance. So for example, when the bridge was out at Rotary, there was also some construction going on in Whitby, and we're not coordinating the message, and they're not putting out signs along the trail far in advance of people going down that trail. And I think that's something we really need to express to the region, the importance of that. And again, it's about putting that hat on. Somebody's from out of town and they're going down that trail for a specific reason, and then boom, you have to backtrack because there's no signage that the bridge is out or the trail is out. So that's my other thing too, is how we're going to work on that kind of signage, which should be consistent throughout the municipalities. Not really a question, but a comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Regional Councillor Dice. any other of our council members have anything to contribute to this discussion before I move forward? No, wonderful. Can I get a mover to adopt the recommendations of this report? Regional Councillor Lee, I saw your hand first, so it's like a tie, but I'll go with you. And all those in favor of this? I see all hands, including mine. This motion carries. All right, so we will move forward. We're 1 hour into this meeting, moving along at a pretty good clip. So we will now move on to presentations. So Mayor Collier, due to our previous discussion, would you like to bring something forward before I move on?
I would, Chair, and I don't know if there's a presentation, if we're going to go right to questions, but I distributed a amendment to all members of council earlier today. My apologies, I meant to do that over the weekend. I want to give everybody a chance to read it, and then just simply forgot. So you got it this morning. But what I would like to do is, instead of, and I'm open to the clerk if I'm doing this wrong, but I would like to move the amendment that I distributed in place of the staff recommendation. And the reason why I would like to do that is, if we bring, the amendment is opposite of the recommendation. And if we would have to defeat the recommendation first before bringing the amendment. So I just feel it's cleaner if I bring the amendment first. If it's not successful, then we can go back to the staff recommendation. But I'm open through you to the clerk if I'm incorrect in that proceeding.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this would probably be the cleanest way to approach this. The motion that's been circulated and is on the screen before you would be out of order if it were an amendment to staff recommendations, as it is opposite those recommendations. It would probably be simplest in this case for this motion to be moved on its own. And if it were to fail, then another member could move the recommendation in staff's report instead.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So I will move this this motion, Mr. Chair, seconded by Councillor Bauer. Actually, I don't need a seconder, but she agreed to second it. And I would like to just ask a few questions to staff and speak to it, please.
Yes, but Mayor Collier and Clerk, should we give the presenters an opportunity for the presentation, or you just want to go straight to your amendment?
Oh,
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff have prepared a presentation and are ready to give that. So the best approach may be to receive the presentation to help guide the conversation and then move to questions on the presentation and this motion.
Thank you, Clerk. This will educate us all to make a more educated decision moving forward. So Mayor Collier, if you don't mind, we'll just do the presentation first. And yes, so our presentation, the TPDS 2021-40, the update Lower Harwood Avenue feasibility study, presented by John Grieve. Mr. Grieve, you do have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And let me share my screen with the presentation. Yes, so thank you, everyone. I'm here today to give you an update or present the findings of the Lower Harwood feasibility study. We'll be open for conversation and discussion afterwards. So very quickly about my presentation, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on where this feasibility study came from, go over the east side versus west side boulevard, the screening that we completed, the proposed functional design, how we did our evaluation criteria, and then conclusions and next steps. So as background, in April of this year, council directed staff to complete the feasibility study, and the feasibility study was to confirm if a multi-use path was feasible in the corridor, to complete a functional design for a potential multi-use path, and to evaluate the current proposed on-road active transportation facilities versus a proposed multi-use option. So staff retained SEMA Canada in July. And as I said, today I'm here to present you the findings of the feasibility study. So moving on to East versus West Boulevard. So first we had the consultant determine if which boulevard may be preferable for a multi-use path. And through the review, we really found that both options were possible Both sides had the sufficient space for a multi-use path. Ultimately, it was the recommendation of the consultant and staff that the west side boulevard be preferred because of its the potential design solutions or design space within it, constructability of a west side multi-use path, and that while there were property impacts on the west side, they were fewer than those potential on the east side at this preliminary screening level. So we moved on to a functional design of the west or a multi-use path in the West Boulevard. The width of the path varies depending on space and other constraints. Generally, we try to provide a 4.0 meter width multi-use path wherever possible. And you'll note that this is a very wide and generous path we felt appropriate for this corridor, given that it is linking downtown Ajax with our waterfront. And the functional design does identify a number of impacts, including potential utility relocations, relocations of fire hydrants and light poles, impacts to bus pads, and then potential land acquisition requirements. And then to reduce costs of the proposed multi-use path, it does include the repurposing of existing segments where possible. So I have the schematic design here. I'm happy to go through maybe more detail as part of our discussion. I can pull up the more detailed, more zoomed in screenshots or design panels, I should say, of each. But generally moving from Lake Driveway on the west side, we repurpose the existing cycle track and sidewalk. The multi-use path then continues up the west side. Our first property impact is at the school, where we would need some small land in order to accommodate the path right at the intersection. Continuing to move up to the north at Westney and at the plaza is our second property impact. Again, small impact on the parking area in order to accommodate the path. And then moving onto the bottom of the screen, again, traveling north, our third impact is at the long-term care facility that is currently being built. Again, right at the intersection, some space required in order to accommodate the path. And then we travel north past the hospital and connect in to the existing sidewalk, 3 meter wide sidewalk that is adjacent to the ACC fields and would connect into the sidewalk that is being built as part of the Medallion development. So this is the functional design that was proposed or completed by SEMA as part of this exercise. Happy, as I said, to go into more detail should there be more questions. So moving on, we now had a proposed design for a multi-use path option, and we had the existing proposed on-road facilities that were part of the ITMP. And so what we wanted to do was an evaluation. We did a broad evaluation based on 4 criteria of local context, integration, local context and integration, natural environment and sustainability, transportation, and construction and cost, or constructability and cost. They were then broadened to 13 sub-factors. And what we did is we used a 3-color system, green, red, yellow. Green depicting a positive assessment or a positive impact, red being a negative assessment or impact, and yellow being a neutral assessment or impact. And what you can see in the evaluation is that both options were quite similar. Both had a few positives to them, both had a few negatives to them, but broadly they were deemed as neutral. So both options really presented some strong opportunities. So this table just tries to give a quick summary of that bigger or larger table. As I said, both really had the opportunity to provide enhanced streetscapes, improve active transportation, introduce low impact design elements, and both had the ability to conform with the applicable design guidelines. Generally, the advantages of the on-road facility was that it is lower cost and it separates the active users, but its disadvantages are it has a higher construction impact as you are constructing on-road, and on-road facilities have been shown to be less desirable to certain users. On the other hand, the multi-use path option would provide full separation from vehicle traffic. It has less construction impacts as you're constructing in the boulevard. However, its disadvantages is that it is a higher cost facility and that there were property impacts associated with the proposed functional design. So ultimately, staff recommended the on-road facility. From a conclusion, we did find that it was feasible for a multi-use path to be placed within the boulevard between Lake Driveway and Bailey Street. As I noted, West Side was preferred as part of this feasible study. A multi-use path may be more desirable due to its separation from the road, but it does introduce complexities and costs. Previous studies have shown that the on-road facilities are appropriate for the corridor and provide a high-quality facility, which has been supported by residents. And staff are recommending that we proceed with the on-road facilities. And currently we have proposed the design for this project in the 2023 year, or in 2023, with construction taking place in 2024. I will skip over our recommendations for this time being, as I know there is the proposed amendments on the floor, and I am open to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Grieve. Do we have any questions from members of council regarding the presentation? All right. Wow, I got a triple hand went up at the same
Point of
time.
order, Chair. It is my amendment that's on the floor, so I would imagine I'd be able to go first.
Okay. I was wondering if we should have questions towards the actual presentation, Mr. Mayor, before we went to the amendment. But I'll still let you go first. Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. Anyway, Mr. Grieve, we had a fairly in-depth meeting last week with the clerk, and we talked about east versus west, and we talked about, you know, no disrespect intended, but a consultant that doesn't live here versus actual being on the ground and seeing the interaction and everything. And when we discussed east side versus west, and I pointed out a few of these things, you were in agreement. Is that accurate? That the east side, there really wasn't a lot of difference, that the east side was basically just the same as the west, given plus and minus different things.
Through the chair, I think that's, I think it's fair to say that I agreed with you that the east side is a feasible option. I would agree that at this high level, you know, the east side appears to have a much greater number of impacted properties, in that, you know, as you proceed into detailed design, I believe that those numbers of properties would be reduced and therefore make the east side look more feasible. I do believe the west side still does have its merits from some of the, you know, connectivity to, you know, close to the hospital, close to the ACC, you know, as I did mention.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but you answered my question. I'm going to have to do this differently because this is the conversation we had the other day. So when we're evaluating these things, when the consultant is evaluating these things, safety versus cost, for instance, do they carry the same weighting, or is safety given a higher weighting than cost?
They would carry the same weighting.
Okay. Do you think that that is the right way for us to evaluate something like that? Or do you think safety should maybe have a higher weighting when we're looking at pedestrian traffic, cycling traffic on main roads?
Safety could have a higher rating. In this case, the decision was made to have safety and cost be equal, but you are right. There are studies where you put a weight on a specific criteria for a specific reason. And, you know, so it could have been, but in this case, it wasn't.
So if we did put a higher weighting on safety, what would have been the recommendation, do you feel? Versus multi-use path versus on-road?
I would be cautious to say that the recommendation would absolutely change. I think it could have and gone to multi-use path, but there are safety risks, there are inherent risks with multi-use paths. And if you if you remember staff's presentation on the original motion back in March, the safety of this corridor has actually improved since the on-road facilities were introduced. And so I don't think the on-road facilities as they exist today have increased any risk on the road. And so to say continuing those facilities northward would absolutely bring in safety issues is fair to say. But yes, generally on-road can be higher risk when it's not designed properly, but I think the town's intent would have been to design them properly.
As someone that's ridden that area many times, I can tell you absolutely there's an enormous difference. Maybe some of my other counselors who I spoke to earlier today will tell you their opinions on those sections too. But there is an enormous difference. Let me talk about the east versus west. And I'm really disappointed because I thought we had this pretty open, frank conversation last week and we're in agreement. Looking at this area, looking at the west side, if you are following along the west side, you've got to go and acquire land at St. James School, which is a built-up area and quite a, I won't say unsafe, but we do receive, and Councillor Bauer will probably reiterate this, our fair share of concerns about residents about that intersection. So that section is, I would suggest, more impactful on the west side than the east side. Following the east side all the way up, you are not even having to expropriate. You could encroach. It's a hill. You could have an encroachment agreement, but you're not acquiring property. Going to the Westney Dryer, again, most of the traffic that comes up Westney, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but most of the traffic that comes up Westney is going to turn left, mostly right, and head south down Harwood. So I would suggest that the crossing of a cyclist on the east side would be a lot safer than the west side, just given the amount of traffic. And again, you don't have to acquire any land through there. Heading up in front of the new long-term care facility at Clements, again, looking at the diagrams a few pages down, it's going to be very difficult to fit through there. We had this discussion. People can look for themselves and see to acquire land through there is going to be quite difficult. And heading up across Pat Bailey Square, same thing. It's a built structure, trying to get land. It's not going to be something we're going to be able to do. What I'm getting at is the east side, when I looked at it, and John, I'll remind you, you agreed the other day, was a good option.
So if I may respond, and I'll walk the group through those four areas that you did say. And I do agree, as we spoke on Friday or last week, whenever it was, I agree with you that the east is plausible and could be done. I think, you know, when we spoke, I mentioned that at the first scope or the first look, the east side was something like 9 or 10 properties and the west side was 3. However, when you look at them in greater detail, I would agree with you that that number is probably too high, because you could alter the design to still meet requirements, but not need land. Or there would be things like encroachment agreements where we wouldn't necessarily be taking land, but we would still be using the property. So the first you mentioned was Clover Ridge. You're absolutely right. East and west, I think both east and west sides are very difficult at this intersection. There's a lot going on. I actually spoke with a resident this morning about this intersection. They had some concerns. My understanding there was I believe an accident at this intersection this morning. Not quite sure. They said they simply saw fire and EMS at the intersection this morning. So I totally agree with you. This is a very complex intersection. I think east and west both have their challenges. If we move up to Harwood, before I move on, the property, you're right. West side, St. James is one person, but on east side, it is 4 or 5 properties. However, that likely could be mitigated if you look at potential design changes as a whole. Moving up to Westney, you're correct. West side has the property acquisition. East side, these properties would probably be easements, as they are open space for these townhomes, and the encroachment would be minimal. Moving further north to the Clements, agreed again. Probably an easement on the east side, whereas west side is impacting the recently built or still under construction long-term care home. And then moving north up to Medallion, or up to the ACC soccer fields and the Pat Bailey Square Medallion development. There is no property requirements on the west side. We would simply repurpose what is being built there. And then any east side requirements, again, would likely be through easements, therefore maybe not as impactful as the high level screening that the consultant did. So I hope that helps clarify. I do still think the east side is plausible as well, but I also agree that the west side has its advantages being connected to some of those facilities or on that side of the road. So.
Okay, so I just got the impression from this that a lot of emphasis was being put on cost, and I mean I'm surprised I'm saying this, but in this case I don't think that should be the deciding factor. I think safety should take a much higher weighting than just simply cost. And I think I pointed out that the land acquisitions that were stated in the report, and when I showed you some of the things like removing the right turn lane at one area where it wouldn't be needed anymore if we went back into the off-road, takes 3 or 4 of those properties off and would kind of take the cost piece out of the equation. Would you agree with that? Does that make sense?
I would agree with you that there's the potential at that Clover Ridge intersection we talked about through design, we may be able to remove that right turn lane. You know, we'd have to look at its need, and you're right, that would lower costs of land acquisition. But the costs presented in this report assume no land acquisition for either option. So they are strictly cost for facility, and the facility is still more costly regardless of land acquisition. However, it is very close. I would agree the numbers are very close.
Let's talk about the cost for a second. So you've got 2 costs, and it's not in front of me. I think one was 801, the other was 883 or around there. But those aren't apples to apples comparisons, are they?
That's correct. So the on-road, the 801 would be putting in on-road facilities from where they currently end at Westney up to Bailey, whereas the 883 would be putting a multi-use path from Westney to Bailey, and then also converting the existing facilities south of Westney to down to Lake Driveway, you know, converting the on-road stuff or removing the on-road stuff, as well as constructing the multi-use path.
Okay, so, and sorry, I'm just going to transition inside. So if
We can't hear you at all, Sean.
Is he talking? Oh, no, he is. Sean, Mayor Collier, you're still on your Bluetooth in your car, I think. Are you back? Okay, we'll just hold and give him a couple minutes.
Sorry, did you hear my question?
Nope.
Oh, my apologies. What I was saying is if you were to remove the section of trail from Westney Dryer down to the waterfront, which is in the multi-use path scenario, what would you, like, how much would that be? What I'm suggesting is the costs are the same. It's not an apples to apples comparison because included in that 883 is a significant portion of trail. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think your general premise is fair. They would be almost identical, if not the multi-use path slightly lower for strictly the Westney to Bailey section. That is fair.
Oh. So, well, slightly lower is better than the comparison that we have, because again, what I'm trying to say here is, and again, you will determine this through design, is that the costs are very, very similar, but what I'm suggesting is having the multi-use path would be a significant increase in safety, and I think would be a significant increase in service to the residents, as well as in a long-term vision, ties the waterfront to our downtown in a direct connection, as well as picking up the trail connections there at Emperor.
I definitely agree with from a number of users who would be comfortable with the facility would be greater on multi-use. You're absolutely correct. A safety, I still, without really looking at them, I think they would be very comparable, but you are right. Usability, number of users who would feel comfortable will be greater on a multi-use path. And absolutely, it lets us celebrate the Harwood corridor and really connect it from our downtown to our waterfront with a special type of facility.
Okay, well, given that, I do have the amendment on the floor. I'm wondering, I mean, do we make this decision today, or is it better? Sorry, let me turn this off now. 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 Sorry, let me turn this off now.
You have to plan your travel time differently next time, Sean.
Oh, what a nightmare. My apologies, everybody. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sorry about that. John, does it make sense I've got the amendment on the floor, but would it make sense to give staff more time to look at the safety aspects and the other and bring us back an apples to apples comparison? I was prepared to go ahead with the motion today, but I don't want that to be potentially defeated because maybe council are unsure, we don't have enough information.
So from a safety perspective, I would remind staff or council of our report in March where we did that safety review of the corridor. That was one of the elements of the original motion from back in December. And the review and the intent of the original Lower Harwood study from 2012 was to decrease speeds and improve safety on the corridor, which our findings from that March report found it in fact did. And so, you know, we have that information on the corridor. The corridor over the last 5 years has seen a decrease in collisions, and particularly in that lower section, which already has the on-road facilities. So I believe we have all of the safety information we would need. You're correct. Staff could come back with a better breakdown of the costs that are presented to council today. But again, in my statement earlier, I'm comfortable saying the multi-use path strictly from Westney to Bailey, when compared with costs of the on-road facility, Westney to Bailey, would be lower, but on a whole project cost perspective, the multi-use path is higher just because there is more work required. That's in the on-road example, south of Westney is done and there's no more work to be done. Mm-hmm. On the multi-use option, we would have to come in and build a multi-use path as well as remove the on-road bike facility. So that is why I think it is important to show it is a higher cost, but you are correct in saying that more work is being done over a greater distance or a greater length of corridor.
Okay. Mr. Chair, that's the end of my questions. I'll, if I can, wait and speak to it after my colleagues have had an opportunity to ask their questions, please.
Of course, I'm in a bit of a decision-making strategy here. You and the two regional councillors hand came up at the same time. I think it will be fair to let Ward 3 speak since it's their ward, with all due respect to everyone else. And then Maryland, Regional Councillor Crawford, you can speak after if that's okay. Just trying to make a good decision here. Thank you. Regional Councillor Dice, please, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question would be to Mr. Greaves. So I'm hearing from Mayor Collier, it's a safety issue. being on the road, even though I don't think I've been on any on-road trail that was a whole car lane width. So when I ride that trail, I feel very safe. The only one I've ridden that's that wide was on the Trans-Canada Highway. And it was great, I gotta say, because you had that room to maneuver over to the right when you needed it and back to the left when you didn't. You got a ton of room here on this road to do that. And there are no safety issues, quite frankly, there are none. I think the confusion arose from, the green paint trying to direct cyclists and give you the heads up for drivers and cyclists that this was an area of possible conflict. And that's throughout the province of Ontario. Is that not correct, Mr. Greaves, through the Traffic Act?
Sorry, the use of green paint yes, it's an industry standard for conflict areas. So areas where cyclists and motor vehicles specifically have the potential to cross paths or mainly cross paths. The use of colored paint or green paint is what is being used.
So any changes that we make, there are going to be some new painting areas that we've not seen before, perhaps in Ajax, but we do see them in Toronto. My question would be to make it feel safer for users to use this lane down from Westney South. In Toronto, you will see now, particularly with COVID, where they put bollards down the one side of a trail, and their trails are smaller than that. There's things you can do quite effectively and they're cost efficient. There are some people that don't like riding on the road and don't feel safe. However, like I said, you've got a whole lane here, which is different than most trails. There is also a lot of pedestrians that don't like to walk next to cyclists, and that was a real conflict on the waterfront. So can we look at perhaps doing something very cost effective down that lane on street that makes people feel safer? And I'm assuming those are maybe for family rides. The other ones I've seen are, the cement parking things. I don't know what you call them when you park in the lot right in front. They're smaller, they're not as tall as bollards. But is that something you're going to look at or you have looked at, Mr. Greaves?
So through the chair to Regional Councillor Dies, it's definitely something staff could look at. The use of bollards or the parking bumpers is something that is often done on-road bike facilities. The one thing I would note though is, yes, the use of the inside lane is the design option south of Westney, but as we move north, while it remains on road, the need for that second travel lane is present north of Westney. So the road would stay as a 4-lane road, but with an additional bike lane. So that type of on-road bike lane doesn't travel all the way through the corridor.
But yeah, I understand that, Mr. Greaves, and that was part of the whole plan when we did the whole Harwood study in stages. But let's be very frank here. That is south of Westney that has created this problem and created us to spend more money to look at another alternative, because some people just did not like the look of it, the lower Harwood. So, we're going through this process for that reason. And I know that the segments of Harwood were different through the different phases. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that I take Harwood to the lakefront 3 times a week. And I would also like to remind council that Ajax does extend past Bailey. And so it would be a wonderful thing to be able to come from my house at Westney to be able to access safety coming along Harwood. I mean, Church Street has bike lanes literally from Roslyn Road all the way to Bailey. And you can access the trail very safely through Clements, and yet you can't do that on Harwood. And you only have 2 roads in Ajax. that doesn't have a 401 access that you would literally take your life in your hands trying to cross over. So if we're going to really talk about Harwood, let's talk about Harwood, and let's try to connect bikers from the north down to the waterfront. Aside from that, that side gets at the whole different story. But the only safe place on Harwood is where those green lines are at the bottom. There's so much construction happening there, and there's windy roads, sight lines, everything. Harwood is not a bike-friendly road, period. And I like the idea of a cycle track, but the track, if you were to bump the track up onto a multi-use trail, that is how I see safety. I don't want to commingle with pedestrians, because the pedestrians on the waterfront are kind of nasty at times. And even when you're respectful and you're dinging your bell and all those things, the conflict is a real thing, a very real thing. And so I personally think that if we're going to do this, we do it right, and we do west and east, because if you're a cyclist, you should be moving where the direction of traffic. That is where you're the safest. They're looking for you. They're watching for you. Going opposite to traffic is not normal as a cyclist. I'm sorry. So I think that if you're really, really looking at safety here, and I think that seems to be what we want to do, it needs to be on the west and the east side. And I would strongly suggest on a multi-use trail, cycle tracks that clearly divide the users if you really want to talk about safety. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. Councillor Rob Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Trying not to make this a comment, through you to Mr. Grieve, long-suffering Mr. Grieve. So if the multi-use path was on the east side from Veterans Point all the way up, and here to my colleague, Marilyn Crawford, Ajax does go north of Bailey. And eventually it went all the way up on the east side, past Ajax Plaza to our town hall, which is also on the east side, over the 401 to Kingston Road. That's my dream. Would it not be, John, I'm trying to pose this as a question, then when you looked at it from Veterans Point looking north, you would see traffic down the middle. You would see a multi-use path on your right, which would be the east. And on the west side, that's where the pedestrians, because I wholeheartedly agree with my councillor, always respectful of Regional Councillor Dyes, saying that keeping them away, as Marilyn said as well, for pedestrians from bikes. So I'm wondering if that would be the best scenario, John, if it was on the east side and the pedestrians were primarily on the west side. Do you have anything to say about that? Like, because I do agree, I've been part of it. Bikes and pedestrians are almost as dangerous, as cars are, because you're so close every time to a pedestrian. Usually you just whiz by. Any thoughts on that, John? Mr. Green?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore. So a multi-use path is a facility for both pedestrians and cyclists. So as if we designated a multi-use path, both users would be permitted. That's part of the reason why in our proposed design, we looked at using a 4-meter wide path wherever possible, because we agree, or I agree, that the mingling of users can be troublesome at times. If you wanted to restrict pedestrians from the east side, we could designate the facility a 2-way cycle track, but I would caution that, in that you would be reducing the general accessibility of the corridor. You would be forcing any pedestrian that is on the east side to have to cross the road to go onto the west side to use their facility, or their designated facility, whereas today pedestrians can use both east and west without restriction. So I don't think we would want to go that route in this scenario. So designating it a multi-use path is appropriate, and as a multi-use path, it's permitted that both users use that facility.
If I may, really quickly, Chair. No, I wasn't saying you have to say no pedestrians on the east side, but I'm saying that if there was a clean, untouched pedestrian walkway on the west side, it would just give them sort of a common knowledge option. So if you have a stroller, or if, I'm not talking about maybe like a jogger that's, in the same kind of mode. I mean, obviously you can't start to, cherry pick, but I was just saying that it might be nice to have an option for walkers with strollers, or with walkers, or, people are implemented, they're not as engaged as riders and joggers, that kind of thing. Just thought it would be a nice option.
Absolutely. And the sidewalk on the west side would remain. And I think naturally you are right. Walkers may over time choose to use the west side more. But there would be nothing that prevented them from using the east side should they choose to.
Okay, thanks for your patience, because I know we're getting right into your work that you've been working on for months, and we're awaiting it. Okay. Thank you, Chair, very much.
You're welcome, Councillor Tyler Moore. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this report, Mr. Grebe. So I remember a lot of the discussion previously that said if we do any kind of changes down at Lower Harwood, that we would need to be paying back gas tax. Is that a true statement? Is that still true or no?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, in my discussions with finance, it would appear that we are past that time period, in that any change, while we would have to report to the province the change, given that we are doing essentially a like for like facility, and we're replacing, or with a multi-use path, you would be replacing, an active transportation facility with another. There would be no repayment, simply just a report that we had changed the facility. Okay, so we're exchanging one active transportation route with another active transportation route, and a multi-use path can be used by both cyclists and pedestrians, whereas the separate cycling path can only be used by cyclists and not pedestrians. So there's no, cyclists are not losing their ability to ride down Harwood if we were to make a multi-use path as one of those methods. Is that right? They'd still be able to get down there. Absolutely, that's correct. And as I previously said, with a multi-use path, you probably have more users who would be comfortable on that facility, but then you would also have a segment of users who had been comfortable on the road that may not like the interaction. So it is a balancing act, I guess, to say.
For sure. And in all honesty, full disclosure, I do not like to ride on the road. So I would be one of those people who would be more comfortable away from the road and away from the cars. Okay, so then what we're talking about here is from Bailey to Westney. That would be brand new construction of some kind. And then from Westney Dryer down to Clover Ridge would be amending, either keeping the same or reconstructing, right? We're talking about two separate things. I keep getting them mixed up in my head of what we're talking about.
That's correct. Here, let me, if I may.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So Bailey Street here, where I've got my laser. So for Bailey down to Westney Clover Ridge, or sorry, Westney Dryer, is new construction regardless. It is either the on-road facility or the multi-use path. From Westney Dryer down to the lake, it's either, if the on-road is continued, there's no change. That facility is already built. If the multi-use path is proposed, it would be the construction of a new multi-use path and the removal of the reintroduction of 4 travel lanes from Westney down to McCrae, where they currently go off-road. So that would be the change on the multi-use path option.
Perfect, thank you. So on the west side, so now I'm gonna think of Bailey to Westney. The west side to me, when I drive down that way, Pat Bailey square and then the buildings and the entrance into the Tower 2, that to me is one big giant blind spot currently. Like I'm afraid of when I drive there with my car. It's because it's up, it's a little bit up, it's very difficult. I think it's actually dangerous there where that driveway entrance to Pat Bailey Tower 2 is. And I think a multi-use path on that side there, I don't think that's a good idea. In my opinion, I don't know. I am certainly not a professional anyway, and I would never challenge you like as to that. And then when I look at all the other spots where, yeah, the soccer field and all that, we own that. So, you know, we're not really needing to appropriate anything or encroach anything. But certainly when we get to Clements, again, it's kind of hilly there, I think. I think we end up, it's more cumbersome actually, in my opinion, on that side of the road than the other side of the road, which seems mostly just sidewalk and fenced backyards on the, what is that, east side, on the east side. So those are my comments for that when I just think of myself going down that way. Yes, you have to cross the street to get to the hospital or the soccer fields, but there are dedicated lights right there, right across at Falby and at Emperor. So I think that's, you know, pretty safe. And I think restoring those lanes of traffic. So if let's say we decide to put the multi-use path down there. So would we actually be taking the entire Harwood? So we would remove the bike path, like we would restore the 2 lanes on both sides, or just the side with the multi-use path?
It would be both sides. So at least as discussed.
Why would we do both sides? Sorry to interrupt you.
It would be awkward to have a single-sided on-road facility for a pedestrian or for an active user that is not connected. So just as an example, so I've Westney and Dryer. So if we were to, so the multi-use path is on the east side as recommended in the mayor's motion, let's just assume. And then you're saying we could keep the on-road facility for cyclists southbound. Well, for that cyclist to get to that facility southbound, they would be on a multi-use path on the east side, would have to cross 2 legs at an intersection and then get onto the on-road facility, or they could continue straight down the multi-use path. It would be, I would argue most users would just stay on the path. They wouldn't make those movements. And to have a, you know, one directional on-road facility that is of a short segment, I don't think would be any advantage.
It'd be kind of like, what's that doing there? Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. I understand that. So I have received, so for sure over my term, I have received comments from residents, both for and against the existing setup. But what I do hear consistently, which is more important to me, I think, is Harwood and Clover Ridge and the dangers presented there. So of either cars deciding that they're going to wait there or like mostly for around school time, let's say, lots of pedestrians, cars trying to jockey in and out or using the bike lane as a parking lane, etc., whatever the case may be. So my concern would be when we're doing all of this, and I think you already spoke about this, but what can we do there to make that a safer intersection, whether it's multi-use path or bike path?
So separately from this feasibility study, staff are looking at options for that intersection. I apologize for the screaming child if you hear that in the background. I promised my daughter.
Best sound ever.
My daughter is okay. I believe it's food time, so she's a little grumpy. Okay. But yes, separately from this, staff are looking at the Clover Ridge and Harwood intersection, and we're looking at looking at what improvements can be made, whether it be signalization, whether it be a pedestrian crossing similar to the one that's proposed at Harwood and Haskell. You know, what options are available. So that's something separate, at least at the moment. As this project proceeds, I think it would be logical to include any improvement ultimately in the construction of this. That way you realize some synergies related to construction. But for the moment, all that this study is looking at is the active facility, and separately staff are looking at improvements to the intersection. But
Awesome.
down the path, we could absolutely combine them. And I would recommend they do be combined once we have an answer for both options or both elements.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I don't think I have any more questions at this time. Thank you for walking me through all of that. I think I'm good for now, Chair. Thank you.
You're welcome. If there's no one else before, I'd like to have the floor for myself with my own permission. So one thing I have learned from listening to my colleagues go with this is that I am not a road biker. I love the water part, the water trail, waterfront trail. It's my joy to ride there, but I've stopped because of that same area on Harwood. It makes me miserable just thinking I have to ride on the road. I am multi-use trail kind of guy. That's what I know how to do. And so I have not been there over a year just because of that area to ride there. So just to say that I would totally go for the multi-use trail for that. So thank you for that. Where are we now with this motion? Are we back to the motion? Because everybody else is done speaking. Mayor Collier, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate everybody's input, and I just want to speak to the motion and hopefully ask for your support. This is something that's been going on for a long time. Ajax Council made the decision to make the changes to Lower Harwood. I don't remember, it was quite some time ago, and I think it looks great. The section from McCrae down with the lay-by parking and the rain gardens and the access to the lake and everything else, awesome. Great job, wouldn't want to change a thing. However, during the last election, I heard loud and clear quite a bit, and this was even a topic of one of the debates at the Ajax Community Center in the HMS Ajax room, was about the on-street cycling and the reduction from 2 lanes to 1 lane and a number of other things. Councillor Bauer, you talked about the intersection in front of St. James, a lot of those things, and I agreed with them. And I said my exact words: we made a mistake, and we need to go back and revisit this and look at it. And I made that commitment. So I'm glad that we have done that, and it's taken almost 3 years to get here, but I'm glad that we have done that. And I think we've come to a what I think is a good solution, being the multi-use trail. I just want to talk a little bit about that. And we've talked about safety. We've talked about separating pedestrian from active transportation. And our new road design that we've taken on has the road, and then it has on one side a multi-use trail and on the other side a sidewalk. That's our new road standard, to my understanding. And John, you want to nod? I mean, that's my understanding.
That is a standard regional road.
Okay.
Would be that approach.
And this, again, I hear the complaints about the separation. And Councillor Crawford, I mean, if we were talking about having one on north-south, great. And I'm absolutely open to looking into that, but I don't think that's what we were talking about today, and that would definitely increase the cost. We heard from Mr. Grieve that the cost for the mixed multi-use trail was actually less than the on-road, I believe, was my understanding, from West Knee Dryer north to Harwood. Was that accurate, Mr. Grieve?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know by how much, but I would be comfortable saying it's likely slightly less if you're just looking at the West Knee to Bailey section.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Councillor Dyes talked about potentially using bollards, which is another option. However, then you would be absolutely reducing Harwood down to 1 lane all the way from Bailey right the way down to the lake. And I don't think that's something that I could support or that the residents would support. But reducing them or removing them from there and going back to 2 lanes is something that I think would be very popular. I have driven down there many times over the last many years, and we talk about safety and having on street cycling, I believe, and I'm open to argument, I may not be absolutely right, but is a lot less safe, a lot more dangerous for both the cyclists and the drivers than having it off-road. And I say the drivers because, well, obviously a cyclist is going to lose an argument with a car. But the drivers, again, when you come up to a cyclist, you've got to now merge. And coming down Harwood with those curves, not always the easiest thing to do. So it's going to potentially cause accidents as well with that merging process. As well as, I mean, I can't tell you how many people have told me those crossing the green lanes, that might be the standard, but a lot of people don't understand it. It's like roundabouts. A lot of people don't understand it. And I don't mean to say that disrespectfully, it's just what I've been told. So I think we have an opportunity here to right a wrong and also do what I think is a huge increase. Councillor Crawford, I really appreciate what you said about having a direct connection north-south. And I absolutely think we need to have a full connection north-south, not a mix, not an on-road, off-road type of thing, which we will have, but a long-term approach. This case, I'm glad it's almost the same money, but even if it was a little more money, we spend a lot more money on things like our boardwalk down at the waterfront, for instance, like on a lot of things, which are nice to have, but from a community safety perspective may not be need to haves. But this, I think, is more of a need to have. I think we looked at this cycling plan or our active transportation plan. I think that came in 2003 from memory, 3-4. It was right around the beginning when Joanne, you and I started. We're 18 years later now. Things change. The town, I can tell you, is considerably larger than 120,000 we expected to be at Grow Out by 2031. We're at 130,000 now by 2021. So things change, the amount of traffic changes, a lot of things changed. And I think we have an opportunity right now to do it right. As I don't remember who said that, Councillor Crawford, I think you said that, do it right. And take this off-road, make it safer for everybody. And one other thing I want to mention, we have just submitted the application. Mr. Grieve and his department, we HAS collectively, but Mr. Grieve and his department and Army and them have just finished submitting our application for Cycle Gold designation. We are Cycle Silver right now to share the road. I think moving forward, Cycle Gold will be something that will be really set us apart as a municipality. But without some of the infrastructure that we're going to need to put in, we're not going to get there. We are also in the process of planning a fairly large cycling event for next year for Trail Fest that will really put us on the map as well. And I know this won't be in place by then, but having the plans in place and that long-term vision will take us a long way as far as even we're already known as one of the cycling centers in Ontario, will really take us to that next level. So I would ask for your support on this. I think it's the right thing to do. I'll ask for a recorded vote, please, Mr. Clerk. Thank you.
And before we move forward, we're voting on your amendment, right, Mayor Collier?
No, it's actually the motion. It's not an amendment because the original motion wasn't on the floor.
Okay, so this is the motion. So we're voting on this. Okay, a recorded vote was requested.
Thank you. On the motion before committee, please state your position in favor or opposed. Mayor Collier.
In favor.
Councillor Bauer.
In favor.
Regional Councillor Crawford.
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes.
Opposed.
Regional Councillor Lee.
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Khan.
In favor. So this motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
No, you're welcome. Clerk, we can move on to the next presentation, I presume.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. We now have the PDS 2021-41, the Hunt Street Extension Feasibility Study Update. This is also presented by John Grieve, our Supervisor of Transportation. Mr. Grieve, you do have the floor, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair. On to the second item of mine today. So here to present to you the findings or an update on the Hunt Street Extension feasibility study that staff have completed. Me apologize. Let me get there. We go. So again, the contents of my presentation will go over the background, route alignments that were looked at, the assessment of those options. I'm going to then present a functional design of the preferred alignment, provide a preliminary cost comparison, and then present a few conclusions, next steps. So again, background on this, in May of this year, a confidential report was brought forward to council, which reviewed the Hunt Street extension and associated or surrounding properties. From that report, staff were directed to complete this feasibility study with direction to confirm the preferred routing, to review the proposed timing of the Hunt Street extension, and to report back to council prior to the 2022 budget deliberations. So in June of this year, we retained WSP Canada to complete this feasibility study, and I'm here presenting you the findings today. So from a route alignment perspective, there were three options that were reviewed. First, in 2016, a Class EA was completed, which identified an underpass alignment option. Through the EA process, it was deemed the safest option of consideration at the time. It minimized impacts to the surrounding properties, but it did involve the construction of an expensive bridge structure. From there, the second and third option were identified in a staff exercise in 2019. Both of them at the time seemed more affordable as they would avoid the underpass or the construction of the bridge in the underpass option. We would require realignment of the CN spur line for both of these options. And at the time, CN staff did indicate that they felt both realignment options were feasible. So just quickly from a layout perspective, shown before you as number one is the option presented in the 2016 EA. So extension of Hunt Street from its current terminus Mackenzie, going under the existing CN spur line with a structure, and then creating a four-leg signalized intersection, or creating a fourth leg at the signalized intersection of O'Brien Court. The first at-grade option that was looked at in 2019 took a slightly different alignment out to O'Brien Court. You'll see the CN spur line as the realignment is depicted by that thin red line there. And as part of the realignment option, both this option and the other, the need for a storage track was identified. So currently, or through discussions with CN, staff realized that this straight alignment is used by them for storage when they are pushing in or pulling out rail cars from the users of the spur. They're able to store either full or empty full or empty rail cars there, and bring them off of the CN main line, which is out north or adjacent to the 401. So they're able to use this for storage, which they find very effective, and it allows them to do this safely. Option two, as a slightly more straight alignment, has a slightly different at-grade crossing, has some different property impacts, but again, generally the realignment and the storage track. All right, so the assessment of the options we looked at, again, six broad, similar to my last presentation, we looked at the evaluation matrix that was created. We first established six broad categories, being the environment, land use, rail considerations, road design and construction, safety, and future vision. from those 6 broad categories, 27 specific criteria were established. Within the report, you'll see the full table. But for the purpose of the presentation, I've just shown the final score, and it was found that option 1, the option 1 of the at-grade approach was preferred. So moving forward, the consultant prepared a functional design of that option. It does utilize the same cross-section that was proposed in the preliminary design completed as part of the environmental assessment in 2016, and has the same design criteria from then, and various CN design requirements which were confirmed with them in 2019. So here's a view of the functional design. So again, you can see a slightly altered alignment from what was currently proposed in the EA. Ends up with a much, I guess, straighter alignment with O'Brien Court. In this option, you now can see the realignment of the spur line and the required right-of-way of that alignment. And then the alignment of the storage track area. So next, once we had a functional design, we want to complete a cost comparison exercise to the option that was presented in the EA and has been captured in the town's 2018 DC study. So we completed that assessment. For comparison purposes, we have assumed that storm, sewer, and electrical costs would be the same. And because the cost of land and ultimate land acquisition is to be confirmed in detailed design, we haven't included any land acquisition costs in either option that is shown. And then finally, the typical town use contingency design and contract admin has been shown for both options. As I said, while the costs aren't finalized, it would be expected that even through refinement in the detailed design process, the at-grade option will remain less expensive, despite the need for additional land acquisition. It is also staff's, estimated, yeah, so and that we also provide, following the cost comparison, a brief estimate of land requirements for each option, but again, those would be needed to be refined and finalized in detailed design. So from a cost comparison purposes, you can see on the left or on the first column is the EA preliminary design cost estimate with a road of 4.8 million, the bridge and rail work of 13.5 million, with contingencies and designs adds up to a total cost of just over 25 million. The preferred alignment cost estimate prepared by a consultant shows roadworks of 8 million, rail works of 4.4 million, with contingencies and design to a total of 17 million in project costs or construction costs. And at the bottom, you can see estimated land that's required for each option. The environmental assessment option, we believe it is about 9.5 acres, whereas the preferred alignment option would require approximately 15.5 acres. So in conclusion, with the recommended staff option of proceeding with the preferred at-grade realignment option, an environmental assessment addendum is required. We've included the costs of that project in our staff 2022 capital budget submission. And during that addendum process, consultation with the affected property owners would take place. From a confirmation of the timing of the Hunt Street extension, we believe it can remain as proposed in its current place within the town's long-range capital forecast, which is detailed design beginning in 2023, a property acquisition taking place in 2024, and then construction taking place over 2025 and 2026. So just to quickly go over the recommendations from the report, We're seeking that the preferred alignment identified in this feasibility study be endorsed by council, that staff be directed to complete the necessary environmental assessment addendum, and this project be included in the capital budget submission. Number 3, that staff ensure all affected landowners are appropriately engaged as part of the addendum process, and that addendum be completed in 2022. And that following the completion of the environmental assessment addendum and prior to the 2023 capital budget submission, that staff bring an update on the Hunt Street Extension project to the appropriate committee of council. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have on this presentation, and can dive into anything in more detail should you have any questions.
You're muted, Chair.
That was the first. So I just complimented Mr. Grieve on an excellent job, great presentation. And the first hand I had up was Councillor Tyler Morin, then Mayor Collier, then Regional Councillor Dice. So, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Grieve, thank you very much for this presentation. And yeah, you do a lot of work, and there's a lot of detail there. You got lots on your plate, so thank you very much. In regards to the level crossing, which I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm glad that's an option. When we look at the level crossing, let's say on Farrell Street, just east of Westing Road, that seems to be relatively incidental. Like when we drive over there, I've been stopped a couple of times. I mean, I'm not there every day, but I'm there consistently. And would you say that the amount of train traffic, I don't know if that's the right wording, would be similar or even less to what we see on Farrell? Is it like a very busy crossing, the level crossing that would be there possibly? Obviously, you can tell the one I prefer.
It would be exactly the same. The level crossing that you see on Farrell is the exact same spur line. So any train that crosses Farrell would cross Hunt.
Got you. Okay. I would submit that not an expert, but that seems fairly reasonable. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Again, thank you for your work, and I hope this comes to fruition. Any and all east-west corridors that we can bring, I think will help with traffic on, say, Bailey, that's daily so packed, so busy. Thank you very much, Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor. Mayor Collier, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if this conversation should be happening in camera. The report speaks to land acquisition of a specific parcel.
I think we're next on our agenda is the closed session. If Regional Councillor Dice would prefer to wait too as well with our questions, we can go into closed session for that, and then we can ratify it when we come back out. So yes, that being said,
I'm comfortable asking my questions in camera, Chair.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Clerk, we would like to move into a closed session part. Can I get a mover to move into the closed session? Deputy Mayor Lee, as all those in favor? I see most hands, including my own. That motion carries.
Mr. Chair, we are live again.
Thank you very much, sir. Can I get a mover to adopt the recommendation in the report flow session? Councillor Rob Tyler Moore. All those in favor? I see all hands, including mine. This passes. And finally, I'd like a mover to adjourn this meeting. I see Regional Councillor Crawford. Thank you, everyone. Fantastic meeting and very educational. Thank you, staff.